First off, you don't have to use labels. Don't have to. Got it? It's more than this assignment. It extends beyond the scope of this assignment. And it adds several layers that we haven't really talked about yet. So if you don't want to do this, I'm just looking for realistic renders of pottery, not looking for labels. But if you want to go down this rabbit hole, this is what I have. And I am going to open up this without the label. All right, so the process that I've come up with, and there's a bunch of different ways to do this. As with any complex software, there's 100 ways to do one thing. So try to come up with a system that would be the simplest. And with this basic label or pot that I have here, I have just the basic texture, mixing a little bit of the colors in the node tree before it moves into the glossiness and everything. So what we want to do is take a PNG with an alpha channel and mix it in with the colors before it reaches the shaders. So remember, the color is a different thing from the shader. What's the difference between the color and the shader? The color is simply the color of the material. The shader is how light bounces off of it. Is it a matte? Is it shiny? Is it transparent? So forth and so on. So those are two different things. Always have that distinct in your mind. So I'm going to switch this back to solid. Then I'm going to unwrap part of the object. I don't want to unwrap the whole pot. I only want to unwrap the area on which that I want to put the label. Okay? And so to do that, I'm going to create something new that we haven't spoken about, and that's a vertex group. So I'm going to switch first to the UV image editor here. And before I go any further, I'm going to duplicate this pot so I can come back to it if I don't like what I've done. So I'm just going to hit Shift D. So I've got a spare pot here, and then I'm going to hit M and move it to a different layer. We haven't really talked about layers yet either, but they're going to change completely next year anyway. So I'm going to go into edit mode. So this is a mesh. This won't work if your pot is still a curve. And I'm just going to select the area on which I want the label. So I'm going to hit C for circle select and try to make as square of a selection as I can possibly make with circle select. If you hold down the middle mouse button while you select, it deselects. Another way of doing this, let me hit A and B for deselect, is to just make a box select. B for box select, and then just draw a box around the area that I want to put a label. There are distortions all over this because it's a round form, so you're not going to get a perfect, but you can get pretty close, stitch. So basically, now that I have this area selected, I want to make it its own vertex group. So this is a group of vertices that I want. So I come over here to the vertex data display here, and we see vertex groups. I want to add a new one based on what I have selected. And here's what you might not understand. If I hit plus, it says group. And you might think, I just created the group. No, we just said create a data block for the group, but we haven't assigned anything to that group yet. So I have to hit assign. Now, that area of the mesh that I have selected is part of that mesh. If I hit deselect, you can see it's deselected. If I hit select, it's selected it. So I can select parts of it. The reason why we want to do this, and there's two ways of doing this, is you can assign different shaders, different materials to different groups. I saw some of you already experimenting with that. I saw different colors on your pots, so you've already started to go into this direction. And you can do that without vertex groups. You can do it with just color and shaders, but that's another aspect of this that I'll talk about in a moment. Anyway, once I have that group, I'll just name it label. And technically, I could do this without doing this, but it makes it a little bit easier. So if I put my mouse over this view here and I hit U, I'm not going to choose Smart UV Project. I'm just going to choose Unwrap. And it's just going to unwrap those areas. And we don't see it over here because this thing is showing a render result. I'm just going to hit the little X sign. So this right here is those unwrapped vertices. It's created one unwrapped material. And if I come over to the vertices now, you can see it created a UV map here. I'll just also name that label UV. All right, so that UV is the data of where and how to put textures on just that one area of the pot. All right, I'm going to go back into object mode. I'm going to switch this guy over to the node editor. So this is the node tree for that material. What I'd like to do is add a texture into this mix area over here where I made it blue. I took this EPS file from the school's website and I cropped out everything and just made this PNG file with an alpha channel. So I'd like to bring that into the project. And so I'm just going to switch this guy over to rendered so I can see everything that's happening as I do this. I'm going to hit Shift A, add a texture. I'm going to add an image texture. Then I'm going to come over here to open and open that image texture that I've made. School of Arts and Humanities, PNG. Now I want to mix it into this color mixer up here. And if you've already changed your material so that you don't have the color mixer, you want to use a color mix node to mix it in. So I'm just going to drag color up to the secondary color up here. And we see it, but it's not really labeled or put where I necessarily wanted it. And it's not really blending in very well. What we want to use is the alpha channel of that graphic. So I grab as the mixing factor. So I grab alpha here, and I move it up. Does it not follow me? Okay, I got to zoom out then. Alpha, and I grab it to the factor here. So now it's mixing in with the color, but it's not really where I decided to put it. It's doing better than I thought it would. But what I want to do is position it based on the UVs that I had before. So I got to add two new nodes. The first node I want to add is mapping. So I hit Shift A, vector, mapping. I just move this little guy over here, and I plug up vector to vector. It's going to disappear for a moment, but don't panic. I'm going to hit Shift A, add input, and texture coordinate. And then I'm going to drag UV to the vector point right here. And the object is probably going to be Bezier curve, which is not a Bezier curve, it's now my pot, but I'm going to choose that UV instead. And so if I want to tweak it and reposition it exactly as I want, because it looks like it's a little bit crooked, what I can do is I can go back into edit mode on my pot, switch this guy back over to the UV image editor, and I don't see the image here, so if I want to load that image into the background, I can come right here and say load that image so we can see how it's actually positioned onto that UV. You notice how it's cropped right there because of this right here. And so what that means is I can select these UVs. Now, right now all the UVs are selected. If they're not selected, it looks like this. I'm going to hit A to select, and then I can hit S for scale and scale it up so that it's everywhere in those UVs. And likewise, I can hit R for rotate and rotate them until I see it become level over here. If it's easier, instead of seeing it in rendered view, I could go to just texture right here and I can see it. But when we're in textured live rendering, it's real time, but you don't see the alpha channel. So don't let that panic. Don't panic when you see that. But I can see it's fairly level now, but there might be some distortion down here. So what I could also do is come down here and select just one of the vertices and scroll over and turn on proportional editing. Where is it? Enable. And I can hit G, and I can distort and stretch certain areas as needed to make it fit the distortion of the pot. G. There we go. So then go back to object mode. You see our pot, it might be bleeding off a little bit right here, so we might want to watch for that. Is it doing that? I see it there on the sides. So if that's the case, we might have to delete those UVs or change it a little bit so that's not in fact happening. What might be causing that is a wrapping or something like that. Let's see here. Go back into edit mode, select all, come in, S, just make it fit just right. Let's see here, G. I'm cropping off that image up there. There we go. So just tweak it and adjust it until it fits just the way you want. And so now we're still going to have the glaze over top of the label, and it will still look fairly convincing. Let me turn up the preview sample so it'll continue processing it as we see it here. And so basically selecting a part of the mesh, making it its own vertex group, mixing it in. We don't create a new shader or anything like that. We're just adding this texture into the shader mix. And it should keep it just on that area and not all the way around. But the trick there is to do that unwrap so it knows where to put it. And with that technique, you can get a basic label. Now, what if you wanted parts of your pot to be a different color? That's a lot easier. That's a lot easier. So let's do that. So like maybe a different glaze or a different material or a different color all in general. So let's just go over here and say edit mode, and let's go into solid rendering. And what I think I'll do is just select a little bit of the mesh up here. Maybe I'd like to have some rings of different color or something. So I'll shift right click, or rather hold down Option and shift right click. I'd like to do this edge over here, not this kind of edge. Let's see here. Keeps doing vertical. Can't remember how to make it do horizontal. Or yeah, I wanted to do a lateral select. But anyway, how about this? I'm going to hit A for deselect, and then C, no, not A, C, and I'm just going to make a little bit of a selection here, like la 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 la. Now the problem with doing this kind of selection is you're not going to get a nice soft edge of it. What we'd have to do if we wanted a soft edge is we'd have to create another texture material to use to transition between the shaders, and we'd have to draw that texture onto here. That becomes even more complex, but for a simple design like this, what does my camera see? See? See, okay. So maybe we'd like a different shader for this point right here, all right? So with that selected, I can come over to edit mode, and I can create a new material. And so this is my current material that's on the whole pot. If I create a new material, I can duplicate it just by hitting that plus sign. I'm just going to call this stripe. And then I hit assign. Then I come over to the node editor, and this new material is the stripe material. And so I can disconnect this texture that I put on it previously. And let's switch to rendered mode so we see what the changes that we're doing. So I'm just going to hold down Control, cut that. We should, oh, you know what I did? I made a mistake. Let's switch this back over to my stripe. There we go. And then let's create a new channel, and that new channel will be on the stripe. So I've added two materials to the same material. My apologies. And so then if I go back into edit mode, we assign it to that area right there. So I hit assign, object mode, render. Then we see that material going across right there. So in this way we can have multiple materials. And yeah, it kind of looks blocky and computery, but maybe it's from the Southwest or something, right? If we wanted to have a smooth transition between the shaders, we'd have to create another image texture, a fairly high resolution image texture that we would use its alpha channel or its luminance to determine the transition between the different shaders. I think that's even more complex than we need to get into right now. But if you wanted to add some basic decoration, or maybe you wanted to add like a different color on the inside of your pot, you could isolate those vertices and assign a different material to it that way. So again, what's that process? If you want to add multiple shaders, multiple materials to one object, you come over to solid, or you can do this in edit mode, but it'd be hard. Go into edit mode, and maybe I'll have a new selection. So I hit A and C for circle select, and I'll just, let's just select right here, and right here. All right, so I want to make a new material for that area. So I create a new material channel right here. And normally, oh, we got to hit escape. Create a new material channel here, and we can choose stripe, but if we hit the plus sign, it made a copy of stripe after we do that. So create the channel, select the material, duplicate the material, and I'll call this red. And so then I can just come over here to rendered, and now that that's assigned, I can choose red, And it should switch over to red unless I didn't hit assign. Edit mode, solid. Make sure you assign it to those materials. Object, rendered. And there we go. So the trick there is to hit assign to assign that extra shader to the material. So you can have as many, I think as many, maybe it's only 16 or 32, but I'm pretty sure you can have as many different shaders and materials assigned to one object. Looks like Atari. But yeah, you can do this and have, so if I wanted the red here to not have any glossiness at all, I could come over to all the different glossy shaders and just get rid of them. I can bypass them all and just say, nope, just that. And so then you can have different areas with different materials. Let's see here, let's try this guy. There we go. So now one material is glossy, one material is not. And notice as I select the different materials here in this channel view, you'll see the different materials being selected or being changed in the node editor. This is more complex than this project really wanted to get into, but that's how you would go about doing that if you wanted to add a label and change different colors. Now, like I said, if you wanted a smooth transition between materials, that gets more complex, but it's certainly something we can explore. Questions? Okay.